Now on vaccines, I just want to finish up with a few comments about vaccines. So what is needed to have effective high-path AI and low-path AI vaccination program? First, you've got to have high-potency vaccines. Second, they have to be antigenically relevant vaccine seed strains. You have to have the proper vaccination program. You have to have adequate numbers of vaccines or vaccinations to produce immunity in the poultry. You have to monitor vaccinated flocks to show they have protective titers. And finally, you have to survey vaccinated populations to find possible vaccine-resistant strains that are circulating so you can change the vaccine to match that field virus. So just give you a couple of examples of high-potency vaccines. This is a study conducted in Indonesia several years ago. And we looked at the potency of vaccines that were registered and licensed in Indonesia. And we used an indirect potency assay, immunizing SPF chickens and looking at the height of the HI titers in those birds. And the original titer that was set as a minimum was 1 to 32 by the government, which has been shown in studies to prevent mortality. But also we set the bar a little higher at 1 to 128 as a minimum titer, which correlates very well with reduction in replication and shedding, so you can prevent virus infection and replication and shedding and break up the infection transmission cycle. So what we found in that particular study is that about half of the vaccines did not meet that second criteria, although they met the prevention of mortality criteria. And through these efforts, the government of Indonesia then increased the requirement of vaccine antigen and also of the vaccine seed strain selection so that their potency actually increased in Indonesia. And when that happened by the country-wise occurrence, they saw a great decrease in the number of outbreaks of influenza H5N1 in their country. The second thing is making sure the vaccine seed strain matches the field virus. And again, in Indonesia, historically, all the H5 viruses kind of clustered together antigenically. That's the way the bird recognizes the protein and produces antibodies. But what we have seen with the H5N1 since 1996, when the first outbreak occurred in China, these viruses in the field have drifted away from the original H5. And as a result, there's variation in protection. So that the first series of viruses we looked at from the field, we had good protection by our classic vaccines. We had a virus we found in Papua New Guinea in 2006, which we had about 50% protection. And then we found a virus on the main island of Java, of which we had well-vaccinated chickens and challenged this virus, and they all died, telling us that the vaccine seed strain did not match that field virus, and the seed strain should be changed. But it's not just Indonesia has seen this issue. It's been reported in Egypt, in China, in Vietnam, in Hong Kong, and Mexico that once you start a vaccination program, you have to continually evaluate the vaccine against the field viruses, and those vaccines have to be updated just like they have been done for humans and human influenza to make sure you have a vaccine that protects. Also, you have to use the right kind of vaccination program depending on the local situation. And here I've listed different types of vaccination programs that have been used with avian influenza, ranging from vaccinating zoological birds to individual farms, to ring vaccination, to targeted to high-risk poultry, to sector-focused vaccination. For example, in Mexico right now with H7N3, they're focusing vaccination on layers where most of the outbreaks are occurring. And the final is routine national vaccination, which was what began originally in China, Egypt, Vietnam, and Indonesia, although that has been refocused to not being nationwide, but being more sector-specific vaccination. And just to give you an example, this is the different countries that have used vaccine against high-path AI, and I put a red bar in the middle. This is a requirement based on experimental studies that to get population immunity, you have to have between 60 and 80% of the poultry immune against that particular agent to have population immunity. And I put in yellow the countries that have been doing the most vaccination for high-path AI, and in blue the countries that did more focused vaccination. And what this really tells us is that it's very, very difficult to do a routine nationwide vaccination program because poultry are so abundant and they have a short generation time. It's very hard to get population immunity above those levels. And so it really focuses our attention that vaccination programs for influenza have to be targeted to the high-risk poultry and has to use the resources the most smart way possible to get the best protection. And that's based upon using adequate field surveillance to locate the areas of infection and concentrating only on the areas of infection. Either that's by compartment or by geographic areas. We have to have adequate numbers of vaccinations. So, for example, in most countries, you need to have a minimum of 2 doses with any poultry that are going to be vaccinated. And also, if you have meat ducks or meat turkeys or chicken layers or breeders, you're going to have multiple vaccinations in order to keep the immunity high enough for protection. Also, we've seen that in many countries, live recombinant vaccines are a very good strategy, at least using in day-old chicks in the hatchery to do priming of chicks before they go in the field and then follow that up with a kill vaccination at 10 to 14 days. We have to monitor the titers in the vaccinated poultry to make sure we have good enough vaccination plan to get the titers up high enough for them to be protective. So we used to say a minimum of 1 to 32, although now we really talk about 1 to 28 as the average titer. And if the birds drop below that titer in 80% of the birds, then they should be booster vaccinated to get those titers back up. And that's in chicken layers. And finally, we have to survey vaccinated populations to look for viruses that may escape this immunity. And we can do this by targeting our vaccination to either non-vaccinated sentinel birds, which is what is used mainly in countries like the United States or European Union, or we can look in the vaccinated population themselves and look at daily mortality or sick birds, vaccinated birds, and look for virus there. And generally, when we look for the virus, we do rapid diagnostic tests like the real-time PCR, or we can do virus isolation, although it's delayed in giving us a result. There are some serological tests that can be used, but they have to be specially designed for the field situation. So we really need to monitor vaccinated flocks. Generally, sampling every 30 days is ideal, a subset of that population to look for viruses.